Welcome to Bicycle Maintenance with a fairly average mechanic, the fairly average mechanic being me. Now, we've done a number of videos in this series and I hope you've found them a little bit useful. Perhaps they've saved you a trip to the bike shop and thereby saved you a few bob. And if you're just getting back into cycling as a result of the coronavirus epidemic, then welcome to cycling. It's a wonderful activity, it's a wonderful sport. And many of us would like to be able to look after our bikes without the expense and trouble of taking them to the bike shop, and just because we like to tinker around with stuff in our garages or in our spare bedrooms, or just in our living room or in the bedroom if our partner doesn't complain too much about the oil we get everywhere. Anyway, today we're going to be looking at one of the biggest issues that many people who ride, well, I suppose a road bike, because we're talking about derailleur gears. And indexing of derailleur gears really is one of the dark arts. Now, it shouldn't be. It should be a fairly straightforward process. And hopefully, as we go through this video, you'll see that it isn't as complicated as lots of people make out. But there are a few key things that you have to do, and there are a few key things that you need to remember. So come with me to the bike and let's get stuck into indexing of gears. Okay, here we are at the bike. The bike is in a bike stand. You don't actually need a bike stand to do this job. It's useful if you have one, but it's not essential. And what we're looking at is the rear derailleur, which is here. And here is my trusty pointer to point it out to you. And you can just see there it says Shimano, and there it says 105. So this is a Shimano 105 rear derailleur. Here is the cable, which is secured by this bolt. The cable goes up into this cable housing, which is this black plastic thing that runs up here and ends up at your gear lever, which is on your handlebars. This particular thing here is called a bowel adjuster, and it is what we will be using to adjust our gears. You will have a bowel adjuster on your derailleur. It may be down here by the derailleur itself. On the other hand, it may be further up the cable or closer to your gear lever, depending on the system that you have. Now, there are two types of adjustment that we might need to make on our rear derailleur. The first is to do with what's called the limit screws. And these are the limit screws here and here. There are two of them. The other type of adjustment we might need to do is because the chain is rubbing on the cogs. These are the cogs here, as you can see where my screwdriver is pointing, and here is the chain just here. So let's consider the limit screws first of all. That's these two screws here. Now, as you will know, the chain goes on the smallest sprocket here at the back up to the largest sprocket here at the back, and there's my trusty screwdriver just coming into shot. So you have a small cog and you have larger cogs going up to your largest cog, and as I'm sure you'll know, when the chain is on the largest cog at the back, it makes it easier to pedal. So that would be the cog that you would be using going uphill, for example. When the chain is on the smallest cog, it is harder to pedal, so you might use that on the flat or when going downhill. Well, that's all very well, Julian, you might say, but what's that got to do with the limit screws? Well, the limit screws are to stop the chain either from going too far beyond the smallest cog and thereby coming off the cassette altogether, or going too far beyond the largest cog here and thereby going into the spokes. And if that ever happens to you, it's not a nice thing. And the limit screws are designed to stop either of those two naughty things happening. Now, as I say, there are two limit screws. One is marked H and one is marked L. Now, it may be difficult to see. It may be in very small type. It may have been worn away, or it may be covered with some dirt or some grease. So if you can't see it, I suggest you clean your bike and you should be able to see it then. Now, you'll have to trust me that H and L is marked on here, but it's in black print on a black background, so it's really not going to be picked up by the camera. The reason there is H and L is H stands for higher and L stands for lower. Higher is a smaller cog. L is the larger cog. So when you're in a higher gear, it's harder to pedal. When you're in a lower gear, it's easier to pedal. If you turn your pedals like this and you change gear when you're in your highest, i.e. smallest cog at the back, and you find that the chain goes too far and comes off that smallest cog and bangs against your frame, then you need to screw in your H limit screw. All right, so you tighten the H limit screw a small amount. If you find that when you're changing gear, your chain doesn't go down onto the smallest cog, then you need to loosen, i.e. unscrew that higher limit screw. And you'll remember the mantra, lefty loosey, righty tighty, from your childhood days. So when you want to make a screw looser, i.e. undo it, you turn it to the left. When you want to make a screw tighter, i.e. do it up, you turn it to the right. Now, if when you change gear at the biggest cog, you find that the chain goes too far and goes into your spokes, then you need to adjust the lower limit screw. And again, you would tighten that, i.e. turn it to the right, to stop the chain going into your spokes. If you found that your chain wouldn't go up onto that biggest cog, then you would have to loosen, i.e. undo that lower limit screw. This happens to be a special, rather expensive Park tool screwdriver designed specifically for these limit screws. But you don't need this screwdriver. You just need a Phillips headed screwdriver that will fit those limit screws. In most cases, if you've just bought a bike, for example, a new bike, you shouldn't need to do any adjustment to the H and L, the higher and the lower limit screws. If you buy a second-hand bike, or you've got a bike that's been lying around in the shed for a while and you want to reactivate it, and it's adjusted the gears over time or just not being set up properly in the first place, then you need to sort out those H and L limit screws. Otherwise, you should very rarely need to touch them. Now, you may say, well, hang on a minute, Julian, my eyesight is a little better than yours. I can see another screw there, so what's that about? Well, yes, there's always a screw around when you don't want it, and there's never a screw around when you do want it. But this particular screw is called a B screw. Frankly, you should never need to touch the B screw, so I'm not going to talk about it in this video. If you want to know what the B screw is for, then Google the fucking thing. You're not going to learn it from me. Sorry, that was uncalled for. I apologise for that use of unpleasant language. If you want to find out what the B screw is used for, then Google it. Alright, now we're experts on the lower and higher, the L and H limit screws. We're going to go back and look at adjusting the gears, i.e. indexing your rear derailleur, because you've got a bit of a rub on your chain when it goes round the gears. Now, this particular bike is my daughter's bike, and it has been set up by me, and you can hear that it sounds like a dream. Can you hear that? There is no unnecessary or unusual or strange or weird clicking or rubbing noise. Listen to that sound. Isn't that a sweet sound? Now, you might say, well, that's no bloody good to me, is it, Julian? I've got a bike that is making a horrible noise, and I think it's the gear indexing problem, so I want to know how to fix it. Well, the way to fix it is to use this bowel adjuster here that we spoke about at the beginning of the video. What this bowel adjuster does is tightens or loosens the tension in the cable, and the tension in the cable is what moves the derailleur in and out, and when the derailleur moves in and out, the chain then moves from sprocket to sprocket. And if it becomes knocked out, or through wear and tear, or through some other issue, it's out of alignment, and it does have to be in very careful alignment, then you have a particular problem and you get that rubbing sound. The upper jockey wheel, which you can just see here, there are two jockey wheels, one here and one just at the lower left of the camera shot here. This upper jockey wheel should sit directly below the sprocket that the chain is moving on, and when the derailleur adjusts, the chain moves and the jockey wheel therefore also moves, and that should then be directly under that sprocket or the next sprocket or the next sprocket. And if the jockey wheel does not sit directly underneath the particular sprocket, then the chain will not run smoothly and you'll get that rubbing noise. And the way to correct that is by turning this bowel adjuster here. One of the reasons that this is perhaps quite difficult to do, or rather it's not difficult to do, but it is very difficult to get right. One of the main reasons why it's very difficult to get right is fairly clearly explained if you look at my video about adjusting Di2, i.e. electronic gears. And when you are adjusting the electronic gears, you press a little button on the Di2 electronic gear junction box, which then allows you to adjust the movement of the rear derailleur using the gear lever at your brake lever. And every time you make that adjustment, the rear derailleur, i.e. the jockey wheel, moves about 1/3 to 1/2 of a millimetre. And the reason why it moves such a small amount is that it is very fine adjustments that are needed to make the gears run smoothly. And it's making that very fine adjustment that most of us, by which I mean me, and one of the reasons why I'm a fairly average mechanic, I find quite difficult to do. When I see something like a bowel adjuster here, and I read in my guidebook, if I ever do read the guidebook, which occasionally I do because I can't do the fucking gear indexing, it says turn the bowel adjuster. So you think, right, okay, well, I'll turn it 3 or 4 times. And then you think, oh God, I've turned it too much. So, oh shit, did I turn it 3 times or did I turn it 4 times or did I turn it 5 times? So I better undo it again. So then you undo it 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times. And before you know it, you have completely screwed up your gears. So do not do what Julian does, do what Julian says. Like Professor Ferguson, don't do what I do, do what I say. And what I say is that it is very fine adjustments of this bowel adjuster that are required. It may be a 1/8 turn, it may be a 1/4 turn, it may be a 1/8 of 1/8 turn, because the adjustments are very, very finely balanced. Again, if you're anything like me, you can never remember which way to turn this damn bowel adjuster. And I did read, or I may have watched a video myself, and somebody said to me, all right, if you want the chain to move closer to the wheel, turn the bowel adjuster towards the wheel. And if you want the chain to move closer towards the frame, i.e. closer towards the camera in this instance, then turn the bowel adjuster away from the wheel and towards the frame. So you could say clockwise or counterclockwise. If you want to move it closer to the frame, turn it clockwise. If you want to move it closer to the wheel, turn it counterclockwise. So if the chain is not sitting directly, or the jockey wheel is not sitting directly underneath the cog, and therefore the chain is rubbing, turn it counterclockwise if you want to move the derailleur closer towards the wheel, and turn it clockwise if you want to move it away from the wheel. What you may have to do is do this exercise lots and lots of times. So you spin the wheel, do a little bit of adjustment. Spin the wheel, do a little bit of adjustment. Spin the wheel, do a little bit of adjustment the other way. Spin the wheel, do a little bit of adjustment the other way. If you start with the chain on the big ring at the front and the smallest, i.e. the highest gear, the smallest cog at the back, get that right, and then move it up the block, the cassette, cog by cog. You should find if the first one is correctly aligned, then the second one should be correctly aligned, and so on and so forth. But it may not always be the case. You may have to do some little slight adjustments all the way along, and then you go back to the beginning and start again. And it can take a long time. Believe me, I've been doing this for a number of years now. I am not great at gear indexing. And if people come to me and say, Julian, and I mean, this doesn't happen very often, let's be honest, but if people come to me and say, Julian, we'd like you to do a bit of work on your bike, I'm saying I'm more than happy to do work on your bike, but I do want to make clear I'm not that great at indexing. So I'll do my best, but forewarned is forearmed. So I do understand the principle around indexing rear derailleurs. The practice of it can be quite difficult, I don't deny that, and I hope it works more smoothly for you. It's not difficult and it's not complicated, and you don't need any special tools to do it, but it is damn hard to get it right. Some people are masters at it. Some old school cyclists will just reach over and they'll twiddle your gears and there it is, it's all sorted for you. That has never worked for me. I'm still trying to get better at it. Hope you'll find this video fairly useful. I'm sorry it's quite so long-winded, but trying to explain these things while you're showing them at the same time is quite difficult. Well, that's how to index your rear derailleur, and I think you'll agree that it's not a difficult thing to do, but it is quite a difficult thing to get right. And you may find that you have to spend quite a lot of time changing gear, turning your pedals, going up and down the block, doing a little bit of adjustment to the bowel adjuster each time. The one piece of advice I would give you is don't turn the bowel adjuster 2 or 3 turns. Turn it a very, very, very small amount each time. And if you do it carefully, if you take your time, if you have patience, which I must say is one of the things that I don't tend to have, if you have patience and you work at it, you will get it right. But it can be frustrating, and anybody who's used a bike or has tried to fix their rear derailleur will well understand that frustration. But what I would say is good luck, keep trying, you will get there. Now in the next video we will look at how to make adjustments to your front derailleur. Yes, you are waiting with bated breath for that video. So thanks for watching. Hope everything's going okay with you during this coronavirus pandemic. Thanks for watching and see you next time.